old short calling Danny Boy.
Okay, YouTubers, this is Joe from ArtAlienTV. Another quick game of Interplanetary I Spy going on here. Now, this is a previous video. I'm going to do a bit of a talk over on here about a ship that I found in Gale Crater on Mars. And this comes from a HiRISE image which was taken in April. The video is called HiRISE Images Mars Shipwreck, Ship Confirmed from Space. And it's only done about 257 views so far, but I'm sure it'll do more. Basically, the image was taken in April of this year, April the 8th, like I just said, and is what I would call a medium quality HiRISE image. It's not top quality, and it's not terrible. It's somewhere in between. It's good enough to show that there is something there. But I really do think that these images are being quite heavily manipulated by NASA, and there's another image here which is taken much more recently. I think this was taken around about, actually I think a couple of months ago, this one. But this image here is of the same spot, because basically the rover hasn't moved in months and months now, not since November, early November last year. And this particular HiRISE image is much poorer quality, even though it's of the same area and from the same height. What's happened there, I think, is that they've deliberately obfuscated this image, and when I show you it up close in a minute, you'll see what I mean. But basically, it's the same spot, and it also shows the rover in situ in Gale Crater by the sort of bottom of Mount Sharp, where it seems to have been for months and months now. But this one was taken in December 13th, 2014, I think. But this is the image that you'll see in all the newspaper sites and all the sort of astronomy sites. They're the ones that. This is the one they seem to be showing for some reason, even though it's lower quality. So what they're up to, I really don't know. Are they in cahoots? Maybe. Who knows what's going on there? So when you compare it to this one, which is much darker and has much better contrast, it's a completely different ball game. But even the high-res TIFF image of this one here is much better, but it's only 10 megabytes, so it's not really a full-size TIFF, because you would expect it, if it was a proper full-rise MRO image, it would probably be something like 100 or 200 megabytes if it was a full-size TIFF. But maybe it's just a clip from one of their much larger images. But for some reason, they never seem to show us the whole of Gale Crater in its entirety. And we very rarely get any close-ups or really crystal clear images of Gale Crater or Mount Sharp for some reason. Why is this? Probably because they're trying to hide or obfuscate the structures that are on the ground. There are many structures that people have found on the ground. Some buildings, a lot of them are buried and ruined. I've found lots of ships and boats in the last couple of years. And this is kind of a quick overview. Well, when I say quick, it's an overview of some of the finds that I found in the last year or so. So here's the main image here up in my image program here, and you can see in the center there where that square is the Curiosity Rover, showing as a bright blue sort of reflective object, and they put a nice square around it just to show where to look. And if you look over to the right, just here, you will see a ship. This is probably only a quarter of a mile away, something like that, and I estimate it to be about 80 foot long. Could be 70 feet, could be 90 feet, could be 100 feet, but it's about 80. It's around the 80 foot mark, and in this image it does show fairly clearly, but not brilliantly, because this is, like I said, this is only a sort of medium quality high-res image. It's not a full quality one at all. So what's going on there, I don't know. But if you look at my hand icon there, it just covers up the rover on the left there. And if I move it over to the right here and multiply it through and see how many times that fits into it, it fits about 8 times. So it's 8 times approximately the length of the Curiosity Rover. So it's probably 70 to 80 foot long, something like that. The rover's big, it's the size of a sort of large family car. You know, it's quite heavy. It's a large object, so you can sort of roughly approximate the length of this ship here, and it is a very different colour from the surrounding white sediment, the sedimentary layers. It's very different in colour. And here's the other. This is the other image that I showed you a minute ago. There will be links to all these, by the way, under the video in the description, so you can download these and look at them yourself. But this is a much poorer quality image, even though it's the same spot. It was taken not long ago, and it looks okay until you zoom in just a little bit, and it just turns to absolute crap. It really is terrible. And this is from the TIFF image. Now, a TIFF image should be much higher quality than this, and you can make out the ship there. It's definitely there, but the color's different. The quality of the image is so grungy. I really don't know why they bothered putting these out in this state of affairs. Really, it really is a messy, horrible, grungy image. So this is why I didn't use this in the video, the previous video about the ship that I found here, because basically the quality is terrible. But even in that image, if you blur it up a little bit with a little bit of Gaussian blur, it does improve it, and you can obviously muck around with the contrast and really darken it. But I wouldn't even bother with this image. It's just not good enough, and it's nowhere near as good as the other one. But there are some interesting shapes and structures in this part of Gale Crater, but you will see them a lot better using the other image. So basically, I've got a whole bunch of HiRISE images here, and this is what a HiRISE image should look like. This is not even a full-size TIFF image. This is a JPEG. So it's been compressed, but not too badly, this one. And when you zoom in, as you can see, it says JPEG at the top there. When you zoom in, it's really quite good. This, I think, is only about 1.5, 2 megabytes, this one. So it's not enormous. But look at the colors, look at the definition, look at the contrast. This is a proper HiRISE image. This is what they should look like. And most of them do look like this. But unfortunately, wherever the Curiosity Rover is concerned, and I think this is part of Gale Crater, but this is around the other side of Gale Crater, around the other side of Mount Sharp. I don't think the rover is anywhere near this at the moment. This is miles away from the rover. But you've got this lovely dark blue and brown sort of sand here, and you've got large areas of white material which looks like calcium carbonate, or it could be salt or something, but it may well turn out to be calcium carbonate. And if it is calcium carbonate, that proves that there was life on Mars, because calcium carbonate, of course, is made from billions and billions of dead small sea creatures which have formed a sedimentary layer in water, and then the water's obviously dried up and left this material behind. It may well turn out to be salt, but I actually think it's chalk. And in previous images and posts that NASA put up recently, they have mentioned chalk, and no one's mentioned it about them mentioning it. So I thought I'd make a point of that. I think they're very carefully hinting to us that there was definitely life in Gale Crater and on Mars. But you've really got to really look at what they're saying and read between the lines. But this is what a HiRISE image should look like. It's high quality, it's sharp, it's got lovely contrast, it's got deep colours, and nothing like the images we get from the ground from the Curiosity Rover. The rover images are pasty, blurred, resized, they're full of blocks and compression lines and marks all over them. They've got image artifacts all over the place. They are absolutely terrible images when you compare them to the HiRISE. And the colours are different. So one of the missions here is lying, and I think it's the Curiosity mission that's BSing us here. They're the ones that are lying. The images are being sent down to Earth, and they're being heavily obfuscated. They've got a crappy sort of brown filter over them, and nothing like this. So obviously the Curiosity team or someone at JPL is doing something to those images and degrading them massively, and we're not getting the full raw data. I mean, if you look at this area here, you've got sort of deep blue sandy ridges here, and you've got nice browns and clear, crystal clear colours. Now, whether they've enhanced this or not, I don't know. Probably not. This is probably what it actually looks like. I just think that the Curiosity rovers are de-enhanced to such an extent that you really can't see anything. Here's another one here. This is an annotated version of the Power Up Hills Artist Drive image. This is another HiRISE image. They've added in the route of the rover here, as you can see, and it goes up to Sol 957. So this is fairly recent, this image. I'll have links to this as well. And you can see that this is also a high quality image, even though it's not a huge JPEG. This is only about a megabyte or something, or less even. But it's still really good. This is what Mars looks like. You've got these deep colours here. You've got these really dark, nice dark blues. You've got quite clear ridges and plateaus and craters and good detail. And I would expect in some of these other HiRISE images to find more ships, similar to the one I showed you a minute ago. I'll show you that a bit more closely in a minute. But I mean, you can tell this is a JPEG because you can see those blocks on it. Those are compression lines, which are really, really terrible in the Curiosity images. Basically, a lot of people have said, are they deliberately putting these blocks in? All they have to do to put those blocks in is really badly compress, resize them down, resize the images down, and then when they put them on the website, they probably re-enlarge them. But they do it in such a way as to destroy probably 50% of the data, which I think is probably illegal, and some of you guys in America should probably take them to court for it, because if I was to do that to their images and then publish them, I would get into trouble because it's against their image policy. And if they're knocking out pictures this poor, then they're obviously trying to throw people off the scent and stop people from seeing any real close, sharp detail of the surface. And we know they can do it. We know they can take really high quality images like I'm showing here. So there we go. So here's the ship again, and this is the medium's quality image. But I've converted this one into a ping just so that my computer wouldn't crash whilst I was showing you this, because I've got lots of images up here, and with the video software running, it might just be too much for it. But when you zoom in, I mean, the quality isn't great, but you can see there is something there, and you can clearly see the rover, and you can clearly see a large ship or boat. Well, it's a ship. If it's over 60 foot long, it's a ship, not a boat. Simple as that, really. So I'll show you in a second some enhancements of this as well in the video. But it must be probably about a quarter of a mile from the rover, maybe a little bit more, maybe half a mile, but it's no further than that, judging by the sizes and everything. And I've got lots and lots of other ships and boats I found in the last couple of years. This is a very recent one that I published, called Mars Ships and Boat Wrecks. There's this one, and there's this one, and there's the speedboat here. So, I mean, that's only a fraction of what I found. This really is the tip of the iceberg. There are many, many more that I've published in the last couple of years. And this is one of my favourite recent ones, because what I like about this one is it shows rather a large ship, which is mostly buried. And when you enhance it, like I've done here, I've just upped the contrast here, you can see the large boat, and there's the bow at the front there, and it's largely buried, but it's there. You can see it, and if you zoom in, it doesn't really get that much sharper, of course, because it's a low quality Curiosity image, only 1.5 or 2. Well, it's about 1.5 megapixels, the mass cam. But you can see another boat behind it, which is buried in the sand behind, like a longboat, which is probably about 20 or 30 foot long. And if you look even closer, there's another one behind that, or at least a structure that is boat shaped. So there could possibly be a third boat here, which I don't know if I mentioned that clearly in this video. But there's whole rows of these boats, and they are largely buried in sand. But some of the larger ones are sticking out, and some of the wind may have blown the sand away. So I really do think there are multiple boats and ships in this area, and I have found many. And this one at the back here, you've only got to enhance the contrast about 40%, and you'll see these structures behind it as well. So there's absolutely no doubt, and you can see it in the raw images. You just can see it better if you increase the contrast and play around with the brightness settings. So this was one of my favourite recent ones anyway, because this is fairly clear. I mean, they don't really get that clear, but I do have others which are clearer. And here's another one. Here's the speedboat. Now, this may have been spotted by other people, I don't know, but I published this one about a few days ago, about a week ago or so. And this is one of my favourites because it's fairly clear. It's not huge. It's about probably a quarter of a mile away from the rover. So this is quite a high level of zoom here. So the detail isn't brilliant, but it's not too bad. And this is near the bottom of Mount Sharp again, and next to a bunch of what look like dilapidated building blocks and foundations of a building. And when it zooms in, you'll see that they're basically just behind it. There is also some other interesting structures. Now, whether that's a building or part of a dock, I actually do think that this whole area was a dock site at one point, and a lot of these long flat structures are part of that. And there were probably lots of buildings along here which are all destroyed now, and we're only seeing the ruined remains of what was once probably a thriving port and possible military base, yeah, next to Mount Sharp in Gale Crater. So let's just play that through a little bit. Yeah, this is called Mars Speedboat, More Intelligent Structures, this one. Okay, there we go. So basically, when it zooms in, you can see the smaller speedboat here at the front, which I think is probably around 20 foot long, and it's got like a cockpit in it where the driver would sit, the pilot or the captain. But there doesn't seem to be an outboard motor. So if this is a boat, and it may not be, but it looks like one, then it could be an inboard motor. Now, who knows what type of propulsion system they had on these things? Perhaps they had some sort of jet propulsion. We don't know. Absolutely no idea. I'm just speculating here. But we do have various types of boat propulsion down here on Earth, and I would expect the same up there. And if you look along the back here, there's this long straight structure which seems to be broken into sections here. It's like 3 long sections. This could be a building. This could be part of the dock side that's been broken up. Who knows? And just behind the boat here, you have this rather strange set of rocks in a sort of boat-shaped pattern. Now, what that may be is petrified wood, and the sort of internal skeleton of a ship or boat that has completely rotted away, and all you're seeing is the remains of it in a sort of boat pattern there, like you would expect to see if you saw an old shipwreck or boat wreck, wooden boat wreck. They quickly become very dilapidated, and then you end up with a sort of skeleton. And this one at the front is probably metallic or something. It's hard to tell with these images because they are obfuscated and poor quality, but there are definitely some very defined boat features here. And if it's boat shaped and it's the size of a boat and it's next to another boat or another structure that looks like a boat, or at least part of a boat, next to what looks like a dockside, then you have lots and lots of things that corroborate each other. And it is quite difficult to tell what these things are made of because everything's covered in dust and everything does tend to look the same. But I really do think that's why they filter the images, is to really stop us seeing what's there. And basically there's lots that I've found here, and I've got this playlist called Mars Boats and Shipwrecks. This video here is called Mars Huge Crashed UFO, Alien Sorter Ship, and Mount Sharp Buildings, I think. Well, another long title, yeah, I know. But this was interesting because this is taken from the rock nest background. So that huge rock nest image that we got initially early on when the rover landed is still worth looking at in the background there. And this is a boat. What else can I say? This is probably about 30 or 40 foot long, possibly much bigger. Could even be a ship. I've struggled to work out the scale on this one, but what's interesting is the front end of it is curved downwards, like some of these modern ships that you get from Norway, and that would cut through the water really well, and the water would sort of go round it rather than the boat cutting into the water. It would just sort of glide through it. I'll try and show some comparisons later on in the video, towards the end of the video, of some of these modern Norwegian ships, because this is similar. There are similarities. The shape isn't the same, but the idea behind it is very similar. And there was this one. Now, a lot of my subscribers may have already seen this. This is the Mars riverboat with number plate video. There's actually two versions of this video. This is the shorter one. There is actually a 16-minute one, and there's a sort of 2-minute one here. But basically, it's probably the clearest one so far, this particular boat, because it's probably the closest one to the rover. The rover is literally only 50 feet or less than 100 feet away from it. And you can see the boat quite clearly before any enhancements are done on this image. And when you enhance it, it really kind of starts to jump out at you. You need to up the contrast about 30 or 40%. I've turned it negative there. But basically, when it zooms in, you'll see. Now, here's the raw image. Just pause that. Okay. Now you can see the boat shape. There's the front. There's the top. There's the back. And you can see a number plate just there. And if you look carefully, you can see a number 2, a number 9, a dot, and a number 5, or a letter S. Now, I'm not saying that that's what these letters or numbers are called. I'm just saying that's what they look like. I can't tell you what they mean, but it looks like a nameplate or number plate. And I did used to be a sign maker and make 3D signs like this to go on shop fronts and buildings and stuff like that. And I have done boat signs and stuff like that, and boat nameplates as well. Often they're three-dimensional, but usually they're painted on. These are not painted on. These are three-dimensional. This is why they have shadows. So these letters are embossed or three-dimensional. So they're sticking out from the actual sign on the front of the boat there. Okay, and you can see it quite clearly here, and I've sharpened that up quite a lot, but you can see it in the raw image, like just here. So these are definitely there. I'm not making this up, as some people claim that I am. This is definitely there, and you can download the raw image. You could go to these videos, look underneath. They've all got the links there. You can download the image, zoom in, have a look yourself, look around with the contrast, and you'll see exactly the same thing. I'm not making this up. I know it's hard to believe for some people, but it's getting to the point now where I have so many of these things that I've actually lost count of how many boats and ships and wrecks that I've found. And even in the negative image here, you can see the number on the front there. So it's definitely there. Whether you choose to believe it is up to you. That's fine. If you don't want to believe this stuff, fine. But this is what this channel is all about. I think that a lot of us Mars researchers established very early on, in the first probably month that the Curiosity was on Mars, we established amongst ourselves that there was plenty of evidence in the first few images, first sets of images. There was enough evidence in the first few weeks to prove that there was life on Mars in the past. Just because NASA haven't announced it to the public doesn't mean it's not true. So I literally had so many boats and ships, I had to make this new playlist here. It's called Mars Boats and Shipwrecks. And in fact, there's about 17 videos in this collection now. And some of these videos are like an hour long, some are 10 minutes long, some are 2 minutes long. And basically, I've actually completely lost count of how many there are. There's this one, Mars Chains and Cables here. And I do think that if there were boats and ships in Gale Crater, which I'm pretty sure there were, then there will be evidence of mooring areas and dockside artifacts like I've got here. I'll just flick through this quickly. Let's get rid of that advert there. Basically, if there were ships and boats, then they must have had chains and ropes and cables to attach them to the dockside to stop them floating away. And you can see a chain here. And lots of people have found these, not just me. I know Monty Williams and Will at What's on the Sky, and Chris at Mars Anomalies, and lots of other people, Amazon KC as well, probably. They've all found cables and what look like wires and chains kind of embedded in some of this rock. And that makes absolutely perfect sense, because if the water dried out really quickly on Mars, which it probably did, then it would have left all these things in the wet mud, and the mud would have just solidified and become a type of rock like we have here. And there, this is just one area. I've found lots and lots of other areas where there are piles of chains encrusted, where it's been covered in sediment and just kind of just stuck there and dried out and gone hard, and they're encrusted and fossilized in the solidified mud. And there's like things like hooks and metal objects, and even bits of winches and winch handles and that kind of thing. So they probably had a sort of winch system. There may have even been a light railway that was servicing the dockside, and some of the things we're finding may be to do with that. But this chain here was one of the clearest I found. But this is quite a long way off from the rover. Well, it's not that far away, but it's quite small, so it doesn't look that clear, but it's pretty clear. And when you have this many boats and stuff together at Mount Sharp, it gets to a point where you've got to think, well, if they've got number plates and clear structures like this, then they must be boats. Because if this was just a one-off, which it's not, then you could just probably dismiss that as coincidence or something. But when you have all these around Mount Sharp in this area, this is blatantly obvious to me that this must have been a port or naval base of some sort. There may well have been military and civilian craft in the same area, like you would expect to see on Earth. If you were to go to somewhere like Falmouth, where I went recently to film a video of my brother's Viking boat launch here, which I'll just show you that quickly now. You will see that the civilian and military and ships and boats are often moored near each other. Military ships often come into the harbour at Falmouth in the UK, down in Cornwall. And when you see these boats that are dilapidated and rotten, you often see the skeleton. The skeleton is the last thing to go. A bit like with a human, the flesh goes first. You're left with the skeleton. The dense bone is the last thing to go. So when you see things that have been lying on the hillside or at the bottom of a river bed or whatever for maybe 1,000 years or 100 years or whatever, 70 years even, then that's exactly what you'd expect to see. And it's often the internal structures, which are the last to rot away, because obviously they were largely protected until they become exposed, when the outer layers and the outer ribbing and stuff like that rots away. You end up with the internal structures. So this is entirely consistent with what I would expect on Earth, and Mars was like Earth. It still is very much like Earth, but was a lot more like Earth in the past. And like here in Falmouth Harbour here, you've got lots of civilian craft here, yachts and pleasure boats, and when you look around, there's military boats, and there's huge dredgers and lifeboats, all different sizes, and that's exactly what I'd expect to see in any port, really. And as you can see up here, you've got some larger craft in the background and the smaller ones in the foreground as it rolls off in the distance. Some of these are huge. Some of these pleasure ships and boats. So I'd expect the same on Mars. And this particular area is enormous. I mean, Gale Crater is absolutely huge. And the whole of Gale Crater was apparently underwater at one point. I'm not sure if that's completely true. I think most of it was. But I think some of it was a dock and some kind of port, and the chains and cables are evidence for that. And when you look at this, you've got a really good scale here, because you can see the ship on the right there and the rover on the left. And even in this old HiRISE image here, this is a much earlier one, you can see the tracks of the rover just in here, and you can see the rover there, which is that bright dot there, and the tracks go all the way back to the landing area. So this is much earlier on, but that's just another example of a medium to low quality HiRISE image, unlike this one, which is lovely and sharp, deep colour and high contrast. So I actually think that all the images come down like this, and a lot of the time they just really don't want us to see what's there, because there are blatantly, obviously, building structures on the surface. And if, like me, you watch lots of archaeology programs on Discovery or on TV, um, like the Time Team, I watch a lot in the UK. In the UK, it's very popular over here. It's quite easy to spot intelligent structures from an aircraft or from space if you zoom in and look at the detail on the ground. You often get these sort of rectangular structures, and even if it's grown over, you can see through and see the rectangular structures underneath the ground, even if there's grass growing over it, because these structures basically contort the ground. And if you have stuff like stonework just below the soil, it can be detected quite easily, even with the naked eye, from the right height. So this is entirely consistent with archaeological techniques, and I've been quite heavily criticised in some of these videos, and they are quite long. I do appreciate that. Some of these videos are 40 minutes long, but sometimes you've got to do this because there is so much to be seen that you really cannot get all this across in a 5-minute video. You've really got to go through some of these things and make a full-length documentary, because uh, there's just too much. I mean, I don't expect you all to watch this whole series in one go. You might want to just flick through. You can just flick through the video anyway. You can just pause it and fast forward it or whatever. But I do recommend a lot of these videos, and some of them are starting to get quite a lot of hits now. It's taken a while for this stuff to permeate through on YouTube, as it often does, especially if you find something a little bit outlandish that people are a bit unwilling to believe initially. But when you have this much corroborative evidence in one place, it really is uh, getting to the point where you've got to just take it for what it is. And it's nice to actually get a HiRISE image to actually confirm what I've been saying over the last year or two. And I'm sure there are many more HiRISE images that I could go through and find more of these ships from above. But when they're heavily buried, it's not easy to see, especially when they only give us the lower quality HiRISE images of the area, which is really quite annoying. If we had the really full-on sharp images of the area, I'm sure we would find an awful lot more. And I will keep on looking. I hope you all keep on looking, because there's a lot to see in Gale Crater. You have to look at every image, but also try and cross-reference them with some of these HiRISE and MRO images, because often they show the same area, and they don't always obfuscate stuff. Sometimes they leave it out because they didn't spot it, or they may deliberately be leaving some of this stuff in for us to find. I don't think all the people at NASA and JPL are evil, like some of you out there. I think some of them are real people and they're real scientists, and they want us to find stuff, and they're actually throwing us the odd bone now and again. I really do think that they're not all evil sort of Freemasons that worship the devil or whatever you guys think. I'm sure some of them do, but when you see the enhancements on this, it doesn't get really clear, this particular one. But it is quite a long way up we're looking from. We're probably looking from 100 miles or so, maybe 200 miles up. So it's never going to be brilliant detail, but because this is quite a large ship, this one is about 70 or 80 foot long, it does show up in some detail. But I would expect, if we do actually eventually get some really good images of Gale Crater, this part of Gale Crater from the MRO, I do expect to find some in some of these other images like this one. But it's going to take a while, and these are quite large images to search, some of them, and there's lots of boat-shaped rocks anyway, and when you have boat-shaped rocks and boat-shaped boats or ships, sometimes it's hard to tell between the two. It's really quite difficult. So the only way to do it is to cross-reference the images between the HiRISE and the Curiosity images and try and find the same thing in the same area from a different perspective. So I'll call it a day there, guys. This has already gone on too long. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll just show you that image again quickly. Lovely image, this one. I'll have a link to this one at the bottom of the description. And these are the true colours of Mars. These deep blues, these dark, deep colours, and these white areas of what look like chalk deposits on the surface. what else can I say? If there's chalk there, there was life there. Simple as that. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you soon.